Gather around. I should introduce myself. I'm Jessie Haas. I'm the president of the Westminster Historical Society. And a couple of people that I want to give a shout out to. We are lucky. I think this is the first time we've ever had any part of a Westminster Massacre reenactment take place here on the historic homestead of Azariah Wright. And that's thanks to Greg Gay over here who said, hey, do you guys want to do anything at my place? And so we're really very thankful to Greg for that. And I've just immediately, your name went right out of my head.
Oh, it's Jane.
Jane from the Vermont State Archivist's Office. I got that all wrong too, but Jane, on her way to the New England Archivist meeting, has dropped in to join us. So really happy to see her. And Lee Ha, who's the president of the Brattleboro Historical Society, is here. We have people who are descended from people who were here 250 years ago, including Gretchen Nickel, who is that's just one right out of my head. Gretchen Nickel, who is descended from Zachariah Gilson, who was in the courthouse and part of the affray, and Gretchen's a member of our historical society from way the heck over the other side of the state, but she's a Westminster girl. So we're really glad to have her here, and just, many wonderful friends here. So we are on the homestead of Azariah Wright, and he came here to Westminster first during the French and Indian War as part of an expedition to resupply Fort Number 4, and they camped here overnight and liked it. And they were men mostly from Northfield, Massachusetts. And when the war ended, they came back here and took up their homesteads in this area. So Wright was here, and his brother Medad was a little farther along the street. Joel Holton was across Sand Hill, and there's a Joel Holton here today. And a little farther up the road, just a little bit of a rise of land before you get to the big dairy farm, was John Norton, who was an Irishman. And he started a tavern, which then became known as the Tory Tavern. And these four friends and relatives, so two of them married, Norton and Medad Wright married sisters of Joel Holton. So it's all one big happy family here, and they represented the whole spread of politics that you could have in Westminster at that time. There was Azariah Wright, who from the beginning of his life was this very fiery person in favor of liberty, and he started a pure Whig militia that he drilled here on this farm in 1768, so way early. He got started on the revolution as early as one could, pretty much. And his brother Medad was kind of mildly pro-liberty, but was also in favor of New York government. John Norton, as the Tory Tavern might give you a clue, John Norton was absolutely a loyalist, a very strong loyalist. And Joel Holton was just like, no, I don't do politics. there's no sign of Joel Holton ever having any involvement on any side of the whole issue. And they're all here. They're all raising families. There was a big schoolhouse over across the road, a big log cabin that was their schoolhouse, and which is actually where there were a few more of them 250 years ago. They're about 100, and I think we're about 40. So they gathered in the schoolhouse, which was a very large log cabin. And that was where all these Wrights and Nortons and Holtons went to school. All these little cousins with their dads having all these completely different politics. And I always think it's a good thing they did not have Thanksgiving dinner back then, because those would have been really complicated Thanksgiving gatherings. But so on the 10th of March, a few days ago, 40 men from Rockingham went up and asked Judge Chandler to close the court. And the reason they asked him to do that is that they were afraid of violence. They wanted to make their statement that, and I'll talk more about that up at the monument. They wanted to make their statement that they were for the Articles of Association. They were governed by people, the members of the court, who were saying, you know, that's treason and we'd love to see you all executed. And they felt like this could go badly, and if the judge would just close the court, if we persuade those guys to just close the court, we've made our point and nobody gets hurt. And they went and asked him to do that, and he said, well, you know, meet me at court because I have a murder to try, and afterward we can talk. And then they said, no, we'll, you know, they talked among themselves afterward and decided to close the Whigs out of the court. And getting wind of this, and everybody got wind of what everybody else was doing almost instantly here in Westminster. So I think, you know, probably everybody's hired man was on the other side and giving information. But almost instantly they found this out, and the Whigs decided, well, we'll just get there first. So that's what this is all about. They met here in the afternoon of Monday, March 13th, the day before the court was to meet, and they met over at the schoolhouse and made whatever plans it was they made. We don't really know. And then they crossed over here and got sticks from Azariah Wright's woodpile. And here we are all. And make sure you get your stick before you go on up the hill. It was important that they, this was a demonstration in the pattern of what they were doing in Massachusetts, where thousands of farmers in the streets closed the courts in Massachusetts, armed only with sticks. It was safer that way because it was technically not a weapon, so technically you weren't in as much legal jeopardy, so that they did not have weapons other than these sticks, but these are pretty good sticks. And so they gather their sticks, they march up to the courthouse, and when we get up there, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So I think we're about ready to start walking, and the sheriff is there actually, so we have some traffic calming, and the sheriff is a good guy in this instance, so happy to say. And so we want to walk over across the street to the opposite side, so we'll be walking against traffic and just head on up Courthouse Hill. And if that's too much of a hike for you, we do have, Lonnie Leasai has a van here, and there may be one or two other people who are going to drive up. So driving up is fine, and probably the best place if you want to drive up and park up there is to park at the post office and walk back. You can park behind the post office. And the van, again, will be available to drive folks back down. If, 1 3/4 of a mile walk is plenty for you, you can get a ride back down. So when we're up there, see Lonnie, the person in the hat over there, and I think we're ready to go. And great to see all you guys. Yeah, we'll go.
I know it was hanging out with you the last time.
I'm so grateful to all of you for being here, and wasn't too bad of a walk, I don't think, says the person who brought up the rear. And big thanks to the sheriff and to the fire department for calming traffic for us, so it didn't feel too bad out there. So I just want to do a couple of readings, which may be harder than I thought it would be, to set the scene for why the massacre happened, what it was all about politically. So in September, October of 1774, after the British had cracked down on Massachusetts following the Boston Tea Party. The Continental Congress was meeting and trying to decide what their, oh, thank you, Jenny, was trying to decide what their approach would be and what would be an effective way to push back against Great Britain. And meanwhile, here in Westminster, basically right about here, right about there, the Cumberland County towns, and remember Cumberland County is Vermont, south of Tunbridge and east of the Green Mountains. The towns met here in convention and voted on a proclamation, and I'll read a couple of the paragraphs of it. So, as this is October 19th and 20th, 1774, as true and loyal subjects of our gracious sovereign King George III of Great Britain, we will spend our lives and fortunes in his service, that as we will defend our king while he reigns over us and wish his reign may be long and glorious, so we will defend our just rights as British subjects against every power that shall attempt to deprive us of them, while breath is in our nostrils and blood in our veins. Sensible that the strength of our opposition to the late act consists in a uniform, manly, steady, and determined mode of procedure, we will bear testimony against and discourage all riotous, tumultuous, and unnecessary mobs which tend to injure the persons or properties of harmless individuals, but endeavor to treat those persons whose abominable principles and actions show them to be enemies of American liberty as loathsome animals not fit to be touched or have any society or connection with. So Tories have cooties. On the same day in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress passed the Articles of Association, which begins in a very similar way. We, His Majesty's most loyal subjects, they said, and they named who they were, avowing our allegiance to His Majesty, our affection and regard for our fellow subjects in Great Britain and elsewhere, affected with the deepest anxiety and most alarming apprehensions at those grievances and distresses which His Majesty's American subjects are oppressed, and having taken under our most serious deliberation the state of the whole continent, find that the present unhappy situation of our affairs is occasioned by a ruinous system of colonial administration adopted by the British ministry, evidently calculated for enslaving these colonies and with them the British Empire. And they concluded, and they enumerate their grievances, including extending the province of Quebec and the cruel and oppressive acts passed respecting the town of Boston and the Massachusetts Bay, to obtain redress of these grievances, which threaten destruction to the lives, liberty, and property of His Majesty's subjects in North America, we are of opinion that a non-importation, non-consumption, and non-exportation agreement faithfully adhered to will prove the most speedy, effectual, and peaceable measure. So a boycott, which is a thing we're all becoming a little familiar with right now. And so they then enumerate, they go through a list of articles of things that they will not import from Great Britain or Ireland: tea, East India tea, molasses, syrups, coffee, foreign indigo or wines. They will discontinue the slave trade, and they actually mentioned tea twice or three times in the East India Tea Company, and of course that was the cause of all of this, was their action against the East India Company. So, change page, Jenny. Whoa, and I'm going to hang on tight. So we have agreed not to import, which we shall know or have cause to suspect were imported after the first day of December, except such as come under the rules and directions of the 10th article hereafter mentioned. And there's some other articles, and then the 14th article, which is the one that really kicked off the Westminster Massacre. And we do further agree and resolve that we will have no trade, commerce, dealings, or intercourse whatsoever with any colony or province in North America, which shall not accede to or which shall hereafter violate this association, but will hold them as unworthy of the rights of freemen and as inimical to the liberties of their country. So it would be not surprising to see the parallels of language in this day and age when the emails and texts are flying freely, but here we have a lot of parallels in the language from Westminster, New York, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the same day, talking about the same revolutionary concepts. On November 30th, the towns met again here in Westminster, and they voted to religiously adhere to the articles. And of course, New York voted not to. So what comes next is from the Committee of Investigation report on the Westminster Massacre, and that was written March 23rd, so 10 days, 1775, so just 10 days after the massacre, from the Whig point of view, and written up by Dr. Reuben Jones. But he's describing what the conditions were like, political conditions here in Columbia County and in Westminster. Our men in office would say that the resolutions of Congress would do for the Bay Province, but that it was childish for us to pay any regard to them. Some of our court would boldly say that the king had a just right to make the revenue acts, for he had a supreme power, and he that said otherwise was guilty of high treason, and they did hope that they would be executed accordingly. The people were of opinion that such men were not suitable to rule over them. And as the General Assembly of this province would not accede to the association of the Continental Congress, the good people were of opinion that if they did accede to any power from or under them, they should be guilty of the breach of the 14th article of that association, and may be justly dealt with accordingly by all America. When the good people considered that the General Assembly were for bringing them into a state of slavery, which did appear plain by their not acceding to the best method to procure their liberties, and the executive power so strongly acquiescing in all that they did, whether it was right or wrong, the good people of said county thought it was time to look to themselves. And they thought it was dangerous to trust their lives and fortunes in the hands of such enemies of American liberty, but more particularly unreasonable that there should be any court held, since thereby we must accede to what our General Assembly had done, in not acceding to what the whole continent had recommended, and that all America would break off dealings and commerce with us and bring us into a state of slavery at once. Therefore, in duty to God, ourselves and posterity, we thought ourselves under the strongest obligation to resist and to oppose all authority that would not accede to the resolves of the Continental Congress. But knowing that many of our court were men that neither feared nor regarded men, we thought that it was most prudent to go and persuade the judges to stay at home. And as we've seen, that didn't work, and they found themselves here where we find ourselves today. They walked into the court at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, about 100 of them, so about twice as many as us. Not such a huge number, with their sticks and no other weapons. And literally 20 minutes later, the posse arrived marching up from Brattleboro. And contrary to what Judge Chandler had promised, they had weapons. And Sheriff Patterson was leading them, and the other judges were there. And I'll just finish the scene with... They marched up to the courthouse, very hot and sweaty because it's a longer hike for them than it just was for us. But they came from all over the place. It had a pretty good hike too. But the court party is described as being pretty steamed up and angry. And they arrived, and rather than any kind of negotiation or parley, as they would have said, the sheriff took out his scroll and read the Riot Act. And I'll just remind you that the Riot Act was indeed an act of Parliament, and it required people who were gathered
in a riotous and unlawful manner, which was defined by the government, to disperse. You had to yell it really loudly at them so everybody heard, and you had to give them an hour, and then you could do whatever you want. So you could shoot them, you could maim them, you were indemnified for this. So it was, I think we've all had the Riot Act read to us as children, and we didn't understand quite what that meant. But here's the real one. Our sovereign Lord, the King, chargeth and commandeth all persons being assembled immediately to disperse themselves and peaceably to depart to their habitations or to their lawful business upon the pains contained in the act made in the first year of King George for preventing tumults and riotous assemblies. God save the King. And those people in the courthouse knew full well what the Riot Act meant, and they didn't budge. They yelled things out the door and attempted to start a parley, but they were in the courthouse. They stayed in the courthouse, and when Judge Chandler came, he promised that he acknowledged that they had guns when he said they wouldn't have guns. He promised he would go out and take the guns away. And instead, they went out and went with their guns down to just past the dairy farm here and had a liquid supper, mostly rum, and came back at about 11:30, as we will hear more about tomorrow. So you have completed you have actually completed the last nonviolent action of the American Revolution, the lead up from the Boston Tea Party through all the demonstrations in Massachusetts, and really people coming pretty close to confrontation, and that ended here 250 years ago, and which seems like a long time and also like a really short time. Thank you so much for coming. Make sure to grab a newsletter if you haven't got one. Lonnie has the van, so people can get a ride back to their cars if they want. And anybody that has a question should ask it. And cool, yeah.
I'm Amy. If you're going to be here on Saturday and like to sing, you might want to tell me that.
All right, check with Amy if you want to sing.
And if this is the only day you're going to make it to our commemoration, please take a moment to walk across the road to the old cemetery, and if you find the tallest monument there, that's the William French and Daniel Houghton monument, and that's where the young man who spoiler alert, who died this night 250 years ago, that's where he is memorialized. So that's just one more thing to check off the list if you're not going to be back on Friday or Saturday.
Yeah.
What's the time and location tomorrow and Saturday?
Tomorrow, we'll gather first over at the, what's that place? Town Hall.
At the museum? Oh, I think I just did that. At the museum.
At the Town Hall. And at 3 o'clock, then we'll have refreshments and some music. And then we'll come across here at 4 o'clock. So if you don't want to be there at 3, join us here at 4 o'clock. And we have the president of the Vermont 250th Commission coming, and Ray Boas from Walpole to talk about Ben Bellows, who really kept the peace here on the next day when people were so angry and ready to do dreadful things. And on Saturday, similarly, there's a pre-gathering at the town hall and at 6, and then we'll walk up to the cemetery at 7, and we have a letter from Becca Ballant that we'll be reading, and we'll hear in person from Michelle Boslin, our representative, and some more music in all likelihood. And we will then go to the cemetery and hold a candlelight vigil for William French and Daniel Houghton, the first martyrs of the American Revolution. Okay, yes?
Jesse, sorry if I'm getting ahead, but when they came back that night, did the judge come with them, or was it just the soldiers?
Well, it wasn't really soldiers. It was the sheriff and his posse, which was a bunch of farmers and artisans from mostly south of here. A couple of the Willards from Westminster were here, and in the forefront of the shooting, sadly. And the judges were there. Yes, the judges and Sam Gale, the clerk of the court, who'd been out here on this afternoon 250 years ago waving pistols and, promising to blow holes in people. And so it was the court officials as well as, just members of the local posse. So there were nobody in red coats. It was, New York government officials.
And they were the Tories?
And they were the Tories. They were loyal to Great Britain. Though, interestingly, some of them stopped being loyal to Great Britain at about 11:30 on March 13th when this happened. I mean, even Judge Chandler, who is the villain of this story, later became an ardent patriot. Nobody much trusted him, and he did not have a happy life, but he completely changed sides, having seen the kind of thing that happened here. So you can't go by people's politics today what their politics will be tomorrow at this time. Some of it changed a lot. Okay, and thanks so much.